Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. Now Ironheart Deep Dive is out and she looks quite nice in virtually every single aspect. Her abilities seem quite cool and she so far seems quite promising. Her character model is much better than she was in MCU. Her animations are quite cool as well. So overall, obviously, it's not necessarily the champion that the entire community loves, but as always, for me personally, the one thing that matters the most is whether the champion is a good champion, and ultimately that will decide, how popular she is in this game as well. That said, there are some few things that I'm kind of confused about as well, but ultimately she does seem to be quite good for longer fights, for shorter fights as well. She does have quite a bit of versatility, and people have already been kind of comparing her to a tech version of Scorpion. I have to say, just a little bit worse. Because everything Scorpion had in threes, and with a clear thought behind, she kind of has it in twos, right? Because Scorpion could have like 3 immunities. She basically will have 2. Well, she'll have Incinerate and Cold Snap immunity, and then also Frostbite as well. That kind of goes together with the Cold Snap. But she does have immunity to reverse controls, which is much more niche. However, still can be extremely useful. And similar with debuffs, where Scorpion has 3 different debuffs, which are extremely well themed in between direct damage in poison, energy damage in shock, and physical damage in rupture. She has 2. She has either physical or energy. She doesn't have the direct damage debuff, which is poison. So she will by default enter the fight with Incinerate as her main damage over time effect, but she can switch it off any fight at the beginning of the fight with a pre-fight into ruptures, which is physical damage. So let's slowly start going over rest of her abilities and special attacks and everything else. As we can see, she can put up quite big numbers as well. So you can inflict damaging effects called repulsor debuffs, dealing 3000 damage over 18 seconds. Now the damage from the debuffs themselves realistically is very small. But that's not the main point yet again, similar to Scorpion. Her default repulsor debuff is an Incinerate, but she can override that with a Rupture in pre-fight screen. Medium attacks inflict repulsor debuffs. Additionally, whenever you dex, you inflict 2 repulsor debuffs, but that goes on cooldown until you use your next special attack. Special attacks also pause these debuffs as well as your armor ups. And your, obviously, mediums inflict these debuffs. And when you dex, you get additional ones. And your lights can give you armor ups. That is something that I'm going to be talking in a moment, where that entire mechanic doesn't really come together, or I'm not entirely sure why it is there, to be more specific. As most tech champions, whenever you do lose your armor up within 12 seconds or 15 seconds, in this case it's 12 seconds, it does get reformed back up, so you will regain your armor up. And if your armor broken, you won't. That armor up rebuilding basically gets paused altogether. She does have about 30% chance on her first 3 light attacks to gain like a 14-second armor up buff, and on the 4th light attack you would have a 100% chance to gain an armor up. But again, in order to throw that combo, you kind of bypass getting a repulsor debuff. Here's the thing. I don't think she has any other abilities, or I did not notice any other abilities that scale with her armor rating. I mean, obviously, there will be potentially, maybe, sometimes when you want to gain some armor ups. But in general, it just kind of seems like a fairly odd thing, because she can give herself debuffs that can expire for reasons, because those armor ups are not the most potent ones either. You will practically always be better rewarded by throwing short-range combos in order to inflict more repulsor debuffs, which will give you more level 2 damage, or more damage over time effect. So that bit, it kind of seems like there's something missing there. That there was some ability in her kit that was taken out, or something of the sort. Because it's, again, very unusual for a champion to gain just like a casual armor buff, and then do nothing with it, where the damage doesn't scale with it, where no other abilities get fueled by it. So again, that's like a very weird thing that I don't quite get, to be honest. Again, immunity to reverse controls as long as you have 5 debuffs on the opponent and tracking passive active. That is, by the way, another thing that she activates. As soon as you get 5 non-stun debuffs on the opponent, you inflict a tracking passive, which allows you to bypass miss. It additionally also allows you to gain reverse control immunity and also parry non-contact projectiles, with like Onslaught, parry non-contact attacks, like Onslaughts and like Shuri's. And then her special attacks are kind of fairly easy to understand as well in a bit. Here you go. While Ironheart has an armor up effect active, she's immune to reverse controls. Considering constant frostbite, additionally, her personal debuffs armor ups are unaffected by ability accuracy modification against mutants. Now, again, this is like a typical tech ability that we kind of used to at this point. And also, opponents that are robots or are suffering from tracking effect have their offensive ability accuracy basically nullified. So that is going to be quite interesting and useful for sure. For instance, she will be able to, parry Hulkling without letting Hulkling gain his pierces and stuff like that. But again, this whole armor upgaining business, it just kind of seems a bit odd for me. Because she doesn't do anything and the armor up reforms in itself. Obviously, it could be convenient when you can gain like a armor up if you lose yours quicker without waiting the 12 seconds. But other than that, weird. Anyways, so yeah, against robots, she reduces their offensive ability accuracy by 100%. Against mutants, that against champions that are suffering from tracking effect, she reduces ability accuracy by 100%, and she reduces offensive ability accuracy of mutants by 150%. So obviously she will be a great mutant counter. She will also be able to block unblockable attacks from mutants. And, that's kind of like a more common ability these days for tech champions as well. Here we can see her dealing with Shuri without much issue. And, there are immediately a lot of meta uses for her. Again, if I'm thinking from competitive play, the armor up ability is something that I'm more worried than happy about because of Mystic Dispersion and like Alliance Wars or in Battlegrounds. Because other than that, she doesn't have any buffs that are expiring, obviously. Anyways, so we went over this bit as well. And yeah, she does seem to be a very good Onslaught counter. Only problem she would have against Onslaught would be the fact that she is a metal champion. So go Magneto, I suppose. Will Magneto work? But Neuroshocks can be shrugged off, so you will inevitably end up taking some chip damage fighting Onslaught because of the Neuroshocks and the fact that you're unable to clear it, right? But other than that, you're able to block unblockable attacks against mutants, so the Crush debuff isn't going to be much problem. You can parry project non-contact basic attacks, so you'll be able to freely parry Onslaught, and rest of your abilities will work great as well. So yeah, without a doubt, she will be a great Onslaught counter for sure. Obviously, she will do well against pretty much most of the mutants, if not all of them. We'll see how fast she is. That will ultimately decide how popular she is. Her heavy attacks also inflict the suppression debuff, as well as remove prowess based on the amount of repulsor debuffs that you have. So she does have prowess control in order to combat mutants as well. She does have some combat power rate manipulation with that suppression. I believe it was a 30% suppression, which is fairly potent. It is definitely quite noticeable. And that, obviously, again, all put together will make her a very good mutant killer. As far as her special attacks are concerned, her level 1 is basically a ramp special attack, which will inflict more repulsor debuffs and pause them for 8 seconds, and then inflict a vulnerability passive. And then the level 2 is basically how you cash out of all of that event. Your special attacks also will inflict direct bursts of your repulsor damage. Again, quite similar to Scorpion's level 2, let's say. And here we go. We covered all of that. And level 2 is the cash out special. As I mentioned, each hit gains 1500 attack rating for each repulsor debuff on the opponent. An armor up effect on Ironheart. But still, typically you likely want to stack your repulsor debuffs. Anyhow, special 3, instantly power drain the opponent for up to 2 bars of power. For each bar power drain, gain an indefinite armor up passive, increasing armor rating by 288, and inflict an indefinite repulsor debuff. Max stacks 5 indefinite debuffs. They suffer 20% reduced potency for each indefinite repulsor debuff already active. So again, I don't think level 3 is going to be something that you want to use in majority of the fights. And her signature ability. Once per fight, when Ironheart drops below 15%, she gains the regeneration buff, healing 35% of her maximum health over 10 seconds. Again, that's kind of very common for Iron Man characters. And then she also gains 35% critical resistance while that is active. This is going to be realistically primarily a defensive ability, obviously, just extending the fight duration and not letting us crit. While she has any active armor up effect, Ironheart gains a Bulwark passive, increasing her block proficiency by 25%. Again, you just need the one armor up for that. And the repulsor debuffs gain 22% increased potency, which, is neat, but the main damage source will still end up being the level 2 instead of, whatever you do with your dots, kind of with like Scorpion and the like champions, pretty much. So I don't necessarily think she has to be awakened, to be fair. I think unawakened version of her will function pretty much just fine offensively for sure, maybe with a slight decrease in damage. But as a 7-star, she would definitely be viable unawakened. And yeah, you would be losing slight amount defensively by missing out on that regen and that critical resistance, I suppose. But, that's just about it. And that is pretty much Ironheart. So, as I said, she does kind of have a mutant hunter scorpion vibe with her. She doesn't have quite as many things adjustable and tunable in her kit as Scorpion does. I definitely can say that. But at the same time, she does have plenty of additional things that are like themed and geared towards killing mutants. I think that's one of the problems, however, with tech champions is that all of their kits are always like extremely overpowered or kind of like specific towards absolutely destroying mutants. And therefore, there's kind of like less over in other matchups for many of the champions in tech class. And that's, kind of like the weakness of the tech class as well. They're very, very, very good at pounding down the mutant class. They're not as good as going up against, mystics and science champions and so on and so forth. So hopefully Ironheart doesn't fall into that trap, and we see her like used a ton in the game in general, which I could absolutely see, given that she's fast enough. Again, whether we like to admit it or not, champion popularity these days is largely determined whether those champions are viable for war and battlegrounds. And if Kabam ever makes a champion that's just, great but a bit slower, that champion loses all its momentum. A good example here would be Sandman. Sandman has decent damage now. Sandman has a ton of awesome stuff going on for him, but he's just too slow. He's just a bit too slow for battlegrounds and stuff like that. So, he's far from the top science option. Love the champion, love his abilities. They should have went harder with his buff, but no. And, the same goes for pretty much any new champion release these days. So, the big question, as always, whenever we're watching these deep dives and breakdowns, is whether the champion will be fast enough. I think matchup-wise, she will match up quite well, but ultimately, that doesn't necessarily matter as much anymore. Let me know what you guys think. So far, I personally look forward to getting my hands on testing out Ironheart. I think they did a solid job building her, animations and kit and everything else. And I'll catch you guys later. Bye-bye. Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about